This time I just want to share some of the announcements in the church, and we should have some slides up there for this as well. All right, so our young adults group is continuing to meet. Their next meeting will be not today, but next Sunday, September 27th at 5. And they're continuing to meet at the LaCroix's home at 5 p.m. And so if you're college age or just out of college and looking for a place to meet with other Christians and have fellowship, it's a great place to be. Also, very important meeting next Sunday after church right here at the park. We're having our congregational meeting for September. And so bring a lunch or something to have between service and the meeting. We have a lot to share as far as reports from ministries and updates on the building and from deacons and missions and financial reports. It's also exciting that we have 5 people who are in the process right now of becoming members of the church. So we have Steve and Debbie Kowalski and Stephanie and Matt Karen and their family and Keith Davis in the back. So those 5 will be presented next Sunday for membership. Very exciting to have some new members coming in. So would love to have all the members there, be part of that. If you're not a member, we always invite you as well to come and join these meetings so you can kind of hear what's going on behind the scenes at the church, and it's a little bit of the business side of the church, and hear those reports from those various ministries. We get to talk about some things we don't usually get to talk about on Sunday mornings. So again, that's next Sunday after the service. This week's a busy week. We got a small group Bible study on Tuesday at 6:30 here at the park. We are continuing our Bible study on the survey of the Bible that kind of coincides with the sermon series on Sunday mornings. And so that's, again, here at the park, in person, 6:30 this Tuesday. Prayer meeting, if you don't already know, has been moved to Wednesday. It was originally scheduled for Thursday, but we're now scheduling Thursdays and Saturdays for work days, and we don't want to have a conflict there. So this week, the prayer meeting is going to be on Wednesday at 7, and that will be on Zoom online. So if I don't have your email address, please give that to me so that I can send you a link for the prayer meeting. I feel like these have been working fairly good, even though they're online. It's a good opportunity for us to share a little bit more about our lives and prayer requests and praises, and have a little more dedicated time to be praying for each other in the church. So that's this Wednesday at 7 on Zoom. Our next work days are for Thursday, this Thursday, and this coming Saturday. Thursday is 6 o'clock. Does that sound about right? 5 on Thursday, if you can make it that early. Just come when you can, though, if you can't make it that early. And then again on Saturday, and that'll be usually at 9. Is that right? 9 on Saturday. So we'll send out another email that you can sign up for those so that Ted and Mike can know who's coming so they can plan the work around that, and so that we can plan lunch on Saturday as well. Something that's not up there for a slide, it's an addition to everything I mentioned, is Bill, who's the chairman of the missions committee, has been helping out with the community center, East Hampton Community Center. Every week, I don't know if it's every day, but definitely on Friday, they have people go to different grocery stores around the area and collect food and bring it back to the community center so they can use that for their outreach there. And so Bill's been going to a couple of the grocery stores in Holyoke and collecting those things. And so he could use some help on Fridays, maybe do a rotation of different people on different Fridays of the month. If you have like a pickup truck or even a SUV would work, and they can explain what to do. You go to the grocery stores, pick those things up, and then bring them back to the community center so they can use that to feed the families that they reach out to. So Bill, if you don't mind raising your hand there, see Bill after the service if you would be interested in helping out at the community center with that ministry. This time, if you want to show some of those pictures too from this week of the building, I think if you haven't been there in a while, you'll notice a kind of difference on the progress. So that's the basement. So we poured they had the floor poured in the far end of the sanctuary. Was that last week or week before? Week before, right?
That was last week, yes, you're right.
Okay. Yep. So there it is, getting finished. So 2 guys in their 70s were doing that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. In their 70s. So walls are going up for nursery and classrooms. There's the finished floor again. Cutting the floor out for the plumbing for the new bathroom. That's going to be a new bathroom for the nursery. And then the hard work of removing the concrete. A lot of hands there that day, which was good. Young and old, or younger and older. Well, I call Mike old, but anyway. The plumbing just went in there, got backfilled. Framing, more framing for the walls in the sanctuary and the classrooms, nursery. So that's the doorway. Is that the doorway for the sanctuary? Yeah, there you go. It's awesome. They're putting it up. So yeah, that's the view as you go into the, or in from the sanctuary, looking out of the sanctuary through the doors.
And the rest of these are from the end of the day.
Okay. Nice.
This is the main entrance walking in.
Yeah.
You see the windows on the left going into the office and the coat area and the hallway on the right going into the sanctuary, going into the entrance. That's our sanctuary.
The sanctuary, yeah.
That's the pastor's view. You can't tell too well, but there were signs and frames
Right.
and stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
The awnings are down, the eaves are all cleaned up. Every single JP sign is out of that building.
Looks good. Good landscaping. A lot of people worked on weeding and around the building. It was awesome. Wow. Yeah, it just shows what can happen if, a lot of people pitch in a short period of time. A lot of good work was done.
All of the work that we did in those pictures was all this week, from Monday to Saturday.
Monday,
Most of those
Saturday.
pictures are from Monday to Saturday this week.
Wow.
Yep. Praise God.
Absolutely. All right, I just want to read a quick passage here from Isaiah 12 before we get our time of music. Isaiah 12 says, "In that day you will say, I will praise you, O Lord. Although you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. In that day you will say, give thanks to the Lord, call on his name. Make known among the nations what he has done, and proclaim that his name is exalted. Sing to the Lord, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known to all the world. Shout aloud and sing for joy, people of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel among you." I'm going to have the worship team come forward. And I don't think I mentioned yet, but we do have individuals out in the lobby for younger kids, for a nursery/children's church. And then later during the sermon time, we'll have children's church for the older kids. So, good.
Good morning. It's always wonderful to have each of you join us in worship. Jeremiah 10:6 says, "There is none like you, O Lord. You are great, and your name is great and might." It seems that there's a theme this morning on the emphasis of the greatness of God. I hope that each of you will join us in praising the Lord and thinking of how he has shown his greatness in your life. Please stand. sorrows like sea billows roll. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this Christ's assurance control. That Christ has regarded my helpless estate and has shed His own blood for my soul. My sin, all the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when my face shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as the scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my Trust my Savior Jesus when my darkest doubts befall. Trust Him when to simply trust Him seems the hardest thing of all. I will trust my Savior Jesus, trust Him when my strength is small. For I know the shield of Jesus is the safest place of all. Jesus, only trust You more and more. Jesus, only Jesus, may my heart be are so faithful, and your grace is poured out to us continuously. And I praise you and I thank you that we can trust you. I pray that you would draw our hearts to you, that you would instill in us a desire to be close to you, to be faithful to you, and to just live our lives for you. I pray today that our worship would be pleasing in your sight, and that as we listen to your word, that you would fill Pastor Chad with your wisdom, and that you would just draw each of us closer to you. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Please be seated.
So this morning, we're going to be in the book of Zechariah. Zechariah, second to last of the minor prophets, almost through the Old Testament. So if you're newer to the church or visiting today, we've been in a series since last fall, going through the whole Bible, one book each Sunday. So we're doing a survey or a summary of each book each Sunday, so we kind of get that big picture of God's plan and his a plan for human history from beginning to end. And so we're in Zechariah. So if you have your Bible, you're going to go right to almost the end of the Old Testament in your Bible to find Zechariah. Well, as a preacher, the best compliment isn't necessarily. Oh, sorry. Yeah, children's church. Yes. You're like, oh, yeah. So children are dismissed for children's church. Thanks, Adam. So again, the best compliment for a preacher isn't necessarily somebody saying, hey, that was a great sermon or good job. The best compliment for a preacher is when people apply what was preached from God's word. And I went back and listened to Andy Longy's sermon from last Sunday. Andy's one of our elders, and my wife and I were away, so he was preaching last Sunday. And he did a great job just because I listened to it. But more important than just listening to it and realizing he did a good job was the result this last week, as was shared this morning. He just talked about the importance of putting God's work as a priority in our life. He related the work on the temple back in that time in the Old Testament to the work on the church that we're doing, and the importance of everybody pitching in and doing their best. And as Ted was saying, we had probably our best showing of help and work this last week that we've had probably since the beginning. So I think that's a great compliment to Andy as a preacher and his message, and even a better, obviously, compliment to God and his word and the impact that it has on our life and the life of the church. And so also just want to keep, as we mentioned too, keep Mike and Ted and their families and their wives in our prayers. They're kind of like our Ezra and Nehemiah right now. They're the ones that are the leaders overseeing the project. And so they're doing that above and beyond the responsibility at home and the responsibility at their own jobs. They both have their own businesses. And so we just want to definitely appreciate them and keep them in their prayers, in our prayers as we go forward. A lot of work still has to be done, and we just need everybody to get that work done. And there's stuff to do besides, framing and, smashing cement. So if that doesn't seem like that's where your gifts are, your talents are, I know Carol supplied lunch this last Saturday for the crew, and there's going to be times for cleaning and some other types of things that everybody can have a part in. And if nothing else, everybody can continue to pray for the project going forward. So keep your eyes out for emails just on details of work days and the details of what work's going to be done, and opportunities for cleaning and providing meals and those kinds of things will show up in your emails going forward. Well, today we're going to look at a contemporary of Haggai. Haggai was the prophet that Andy spoke about last Sunday, and both Haggai and Zechariah were on the scene as the Israelites were coming back from the exile, and they were under the task of rebuilding a temple, under the task of rebuilding a city. So you can only imagine, taking our little project and multiplying that by 100. That's what they were dealing with. That's what Haggai and Zechariah were dealing with the people of Israel. So please bow with me. I'm going to pray, and then we'll get into the specifics of this book of Zechariah. God, we thank you for just how your timing is absolutely perfect. as we look at these two prophets last week and this week, and as us as a church, we're going into the process of rebuilding or building a place of worship. God, I know it's not a complete correlation between a temple and a church, but as far as our hearts, God, as far as our dedication to you and our commitment to the church and the church family, there's a lot of similarities going on there. And God, I pray that we would just glean from those this morning as we look at this book, this very important book from the Old Testament as we transition soon into the New Testament. God, we pray that you would just do your work that you want to do in us this morning. And God, that you would transform us from the inside out. And God, that you do that heart surgery that only you can do, that's supernatural. And God, I pray that I would depend on your Spirit this morning as they preach. And God, that the church would depend on your Spirit as they listen and process what they're about to hear. And God, we just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so a little bit about Zechariah before we get more into the actual text of the book. He was a grandson of a priest called Iddo, and he prophesied again to the people of Judah. And they were just returning from Babylon to Israel. They'd been there for 70 years. So some of these people returning, they really didn't know much about Jerusalem or Judah or any of this stuff. They didn't really have history there. A lot of their history was in Babylon. And a lot of the responsibility of people like Haggai and Zechariah and later Ezra and Nehemiah and Zerubbabel was to motivate these people who had actually gotten really comfortable in Babylon. They had gotten kind of comfortable with the culture and the time, and now it was time for God to reestablish their nation. And they were a little bit complacent. They weren't really, real gung-ho to some degree. And so they needed some motivation. They needed some encouragement. They needed some hope of not only what God was going to do in their generation, but what God would do in future generations after them. And so Zechariah's grandfather returned from Babylon with Zechariah, and they were really the first group that came back. And this was around 538 BC. It was under the decree of Cyrus, king of Persia. So God used the Babylonians to teach the Israelites a lesson, to bring some judgment on them, some punishment, brought them to Babylon. And that's where they were for exile for those years. But it was time for God to release them. And he used the Persians to come in and take over the Babylonians and establish a new empire. And in that process, they were free to head back to Israel, to Judah, to establish the new Jerusalem at that time. Well, because Zechariah is in a lineage of priestly lineage, he is also not only just a prophet, but he's also considered a priest as well. So he has kind of a dual role in that sense. Zechariah is a younger man compared to Haggai, and so he comes alongside the older prophet and kind of reiterates the message of Haggai. So there's a lot of similarities between what maybe you heard last Sunday and this Sunday, between the two books. Similar but different in the sense that they're in the same historical context. Haggai was a little bit more cautionary in his tone. He pointed really more to the Jewish, their sin and their self-focus. Zechariah, we're going to see, I think is more encouraging, I guess. There is that aspect of warning, of like possible continued judgment if they aren't faithful to God and his covenants. But I think we find a lot of encouragement here in Zechariah, which I needed this week, and I maybe some of you needed this week too, or just in the time that we live in. We need some encouragement from God's word, and I think we find it here in Zechariah. So it's interesting with Zechariah because there's a lot of specific dates in this book based on what Zechariah talks about of when he prophesied. So we know that he begins his prophecy in basically November of 520 BC. We see that in Zechariah 1:1. He receives these 8 visions. So at the center of this book are these visions that we'll talk about here in a minute. And those came around February of 519 BC. We see that in chapter 1:7. And then that's followed by another 4 messages that he preached on December 7th of 518 BC. Now the final chapters, 9 through 14, they don't give a date to those. We're not sure if those were given later or written later in time. But that kind of gives you the time period. So this is 500 or so years before the coming of Christ is this historical time that we're looking at right now. Why is Zechariah important? Well, there's a few things, and I think really the main thing was what I'll talk about next. Is Zechariah contains probably some of the clearest and most direct messianic prophecies outside of the major prophets like Isaiah. So Zechariah is actually considered like a mini Isaiah because of the amount of clear, decisive prophecies related to the coming of Jesus. Zechariah has prophecy about the first coming and the second coming of the Messiah. So very messianic in its focus and in its purpose. Zechariah's name means Yahweh remembers. Yahweh remembers. And in the Old Testament, specifically, names were important. A lot of times, the purpose of the writing was tied to that person's name. So Zechariah means Yahweh remembers. And it means that basically, Zechariah gives hope that God remembers his promises to his people. That's the thing that we've seen all the way through the Old Testament, right? That God gives promises. The Israelites aren't great at following their part of the covenant of the promises, but God is so faithful to his promises. He never forgets them. He never forgets what he's going to do and his plan for his people. Zechariah helps us to see that when Jesus comes again, he will not only be Savior, but he'll be judge, and ultimately he will be the righteous king ruling his people from Jerusalem. And so we get this depth and kind of breadth of who Jesus is in the book of Zechariah. His saving nature, but also his kingly nature is in there as well. So like a lot of the other prophets too, Zechariah gives kind of some isolated snapshots of the future. So some of his prophecies was near future to the Israelites, but it's still maybe near or far future for us as well. Now, Zechariah, like Daniel and Revelation, is one of those books that people who are into end times likes to dissect and get really detailed with and try to figure out what is he talking about here, and is this, this time, or is this time, or is it talking about this city or that city? I'm not going to get into all those details necessarily, and I'm not even sure if that was God's major intention with some of these books, is for us to spend exhaustive amount of time trying to figure out every little detail about how things are going to end at the end of the time. There's different views on the millennial structure and timing and what that's going to look like. There's different views on his return, if it's going to be before millennial or after millennial, or if there's not going to be a literal millennial kingdom. Those all things are talked about a little bit here in the book of Zechariah. I think the important thing is that this book gives us hope that Jesus is going to return. He is the king. He's going to establish a kingdom that's like no other. And that he is going to deal with evil. He's going to deal with sin once and for all. And for those of you or us that are followers of Jesus, we want to be in that kingdom. We want to be under the rule of King Jesus. We don't want to be under our own rule. We don't necessarily want to be under the rule of human kings, but we want to be under the rule of King Jesus. And that's the most important thing that we're going to see, I think, in this book. Some of the things that it talks about, specifically about the nation of Israel, is that they will be judged. We see that in chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. But he will also restore them. He'll cleanse them. I've talked about this a lot through the prophets, is I do believe there's going to be a revival in Israel with national Jews. Right now, very few ethnic Jews are followers of King Jesus, Messiah Jesus. And that was talked about, too, in the New Testament. Paul talks a lot about the fact that there's only going to be a remnant. But in the future time, there will be, I believe, a revival in the Jewish people. So we see that here in Zechariah as well. He will rebuild his people. Zechariah concludes his book by looking into the distant future. We see both the rejection of the Messiah, which we know happened when he came, but we will also see this eventual reign when Israel will finally be delivered, and that's at the end of the book. Interesting kind of structure of this book. There is a structure to it. Some of the prophetic books are kind of straightforward, just talking to people saying, hey, you guys are sinners, you need to get back to following Jesus. Other the books have these visions and these dreams that are very strange to us. I don't put a lot of stake in my dreams because my dreams are very strange, even stranger than the ones you see in the Bible. So I wake up and it's like, I'm not even going to try to figure out what that means at all. It's like Maybe I had bad Mexican the night before, and that's why I had such a weird dream. I don't really remember them that well anyway. So I don't know what you're like about dreams, but we can trust when it came to the prophets that there was a purpose to these dreams, and there was some symbolism to them that are helpful for us to see. Well, the book starts off with an introduction. Chapter 1, verses 1 through 6, really sets the tone for the collection of these dreams that Zechariah has. He challenges his generation to turn back to God and not to be like their ancestors. Right? Here's the opportunity, right? He gives a fresh start. They were in exile. He brings them back and says, okay, don't be like your ancestors. That's what got them sent to Babylon. Let's try to do it different this time. And so verse 1:6 seems like they have a repentive attitude. It says, then they repented and said, the Lord Almighty has done to us what our ways and practices deserve, just as he determined to do. So it seems like they're maybe on a good track here. Well, Zechariah has these 8 dreams, these visions. And again, they're bizarre. They're a little different. But they gave insight into current events for them, but gives us a little bit of insights into what we have to look forward to ourselves. It helps, right? It helps to have a future to look forward to. I just know in daily life, sometimes if you're going through your week and it's a tough work week, sometimes there's something on the weekend that you're looking forward to that gives you hope that I can get through this week. Or maybe you have something off in the distance, a vacation or something. You're like, I can get through this month because I have this to look forward to. But what Zechariah gives us is greater than a weekend or a vacation to look forward to. It's a magnificent reality that we'll have with Jesus. Now, the structure of these dreams and these visions are structured in such a way that they're paired up. So there's 8 of them. So the first one and the 8th one go together, and then you kind of get towards the middle. The 2nd and the 7th go together, and the 3rd and the 6th and the 4th and the 5th go together. So there's a pairing of these visions and dreams that actually makes sense when we start to look at these things. So let's look at the 1st and the 8th vision. They both have to do with these horsemen that are on patrol, if you will. They symbolize God's attention and watch over the world. We need to be reminded of that. God is watching over this world. As chaotic and crazy as it is, God is still sovereign, he's still in control, and he is watching over the world. And even in that time, it talks about how God brought peace to the region. He used the Persians to conquer the Babylonians, and there was a sense of peace. The Persian kings were more favorable to the Israelites than the Babylonians and the Assyrians before them. So we're starting to see some of this outworking of God's plan. Moving on to the 2nd and 7th of the dreams, we find that in chapter 1, 18 through 21 being the second one, and the 7th dream is found in chapter 5, 5 through 11. It's a reflection on Israel's past and their sin in the exile. In the second dream, you have these 4 horns and these 4 craftsmen. The 4 horns in the Bible usually are a symbol of strength and power. And so the 4 horns talks about the nations that basically attacked Israel and scattered them. Okay, so that probably is more talking about the Assyrians and the Babylonians. The craftsmen are more talking about the Persians who then came in and destroyed the Babylonians and scattered them. Then if you look at the other side of that pair, the 7th dream is about a woman in a basket. Okay, this is probably the weirdest of all of them. It's a woman in a basket, and then you have other women who with wings, and they carry her off. So most likely this is a symbolism of Israel's rebellion. The fact that she was carried off to Babylon was kind of this idea of this woman in a basket being carried off. When it comes to these dreams, at least for me, it's good to get kind of the idea, but not to pick them apart too much and get too into them, because you can really drive yourself crazy if you try to add too much symbolism to them. So anyway, that's the 7th dream. Next is the pairing of the 3rd and the 6th one. And these have to do with the rebuilding of Jerusalem. In the 3rd one, you have this vision of a man measuring out a city. It's a sign that the city would be rebuilt. It would be a beacon to the nations that God was joining his people together for worship. The 6th dream is a vision of the scroll flying around the New Jerusalem. And it's this idea that God's going to bring punishment to the thieves and the liars. Basically, in the New Jerusalem, God's going to purify it with his word. There's not going to be deception. There's not going to be stealing. There's not going to be these things that plague us in our lives now. All right, so moving on to the two middle dreams or visions, if you will. These have to do with these two key leaders that are part of the returning exiles. Joshua, I don't know if you know what the name Joshua means, but it means God saves. And actually, the name Jesus comes from Joshua. It's a derivative of Joshua. So there's importance, again, in the name of Joshua being a high priest, and then another guy named Zerubbabel. And he was in the royal line of King David. So partly what this is telling us is that eventually there would be the Savior, who was Jesus, who would be a prophet, priest, king. He would have all those roles in one person. So here you have this priest and this king as these two main figures in the return of the exiled people. In the fourth dream, we have Joshua symbolically wearing Israel's sin in the form of these dirty clothes. But then eventually they're taken off, and Joshua is given new clothes as a symbol of God's grace and forgiveness. So then an angel tells Joshua that if he remains faithful to God, he will lead God's people and become a symbol of their future, the future messianic kingdom. This is what he says. If you have your Bibles, chapter 3, 7 through 8 says this. This is what the Lord Almighty says. If you will walk in obedience to me and keep my requirements, then you will govern my house and have charge of my courts. And I will give you a place among these standing here. Listen, High Priest Joshua, you and your associates seated before you, who are men symbolic of things to come. I'm going to bring my servant, the branch. The branch is referring to Jesus Christ. And as we know that ultimately none of us would be obedient to Christ if it wasn't for the work of the Holy Spirit in our life. It's the new covenant, the work of the Holy Spirit and Jesus coming that allows us to be obedient to him and for him so that we could be part of his kingdom. Well, the last of the visions is this vision of these two olive trees that supply oil to a lamp. And these are, again, symbolic of God's watchful eye over his people. These trees represent these two leaders, Joshua and Zerubbabel, leading the temple rebuilding. Success will come only if they depend on God's Spirit. I think Andy talked about this a little bit last week. When it comes just to life in general or the ministries that God's called us to, it can be really easy to just say, I'm just going to go do these things. Yeah, God, you called me to it, but I'm going to go do it in my own strength. I'm capable of doing it. I'm smart enough to do it. And sometimes you just don't take that time to go, you know what? I don't want to do this in my own strength. I don't want to do it if the Spirit of God's not with me. Remember Joshua when they were at Mount Sinai and they had the whole calf thing and God says, okay, go, but I'm not going to be with you. Moses. And Moses goes, I don't want to go if you're not going to go with me. That should be our attitude about doing ministry. That should be our attitude about building this building and this church home. We don't want to go do these things if God's Spirit's not going to be with us. So sometimes God's going to say, okay, go ahead and do it in your own strength and see how that goes, And we usually fail miserably when we have that attitude. And sometimes we don't realize why we're failing and struggling so hard, and it just takes that minute to look back and go, you know what? I didn't even ask for God's help. I didn't even care if his Spirit was going along with me, that he was empowering me to do these things. And, again, I listened to Andy's sermon. It was just great how he was talking about, it's not wrong to have these kind of earthly things like houses and stuff, but is that our focus? Is that our main priority in life? Or something greater that God has called us as Christians to be part of? I think, at least for me, that's one of the greatest things about being a Christian is I have purpose beyond this world. I have purpose behind this life. I'm not just working a 9-to-5 job or just trying to, get through the week so I can enjoy my weekend or just can't wait for the next vacation. That every day as a Christian we have purpose. Every day as a Christian that we can do something supernatural in this world. Does that get you excited about your life or what? You could even have a horrible job. You can have a miserable job, and yet you can still go to that job with purpose. Say, you know what? It might not be about what I'm doing today, but it might be about the people that I'm going and being with. That I get to go and be a light of Christ to the people that I'm around. I know maybe some of you are mothers and you're at home, and those days can be hard too, right? It feels like sometimes you're doing the same thing every day, but you have the responsibility of raising those children and leading them to the Lord and discipling them. That's way greater than just being in this life and just raising a family because that's what you're supposed to do. We all have our special place in this world. We all have supernatural, God-inspired, God-empowered things to do. And that's what makes me excited about being a Christian in this world. As hard as this world is and how hard life can be, that's what is exciting about this life. And I want to be with the Spirit. I want the Spirit to be with me as we do these things. And that's what Zechariah is telling these people too. Don't go build a temple. Don't go build a Jerusalem if you're not doing it dependent on the Spirit of God. And so I can't help but to see the same exhortation that Andy gave from Haggai and Zechariah. I think he's saying a very similar thing here. So after those 8 visions, then we have like a bonus vision after that, chapter 6, 9 through 15. And Joshua was given this crown, and I think it's a symbol, again, back to Jesus being this future messianic priest and king. Because Joshua was a priest, but then he's given a crown, and it helps us to understand Jesus as priest and king. Why is it important that Jesus is a priest and a king? It's great that he's king, right? That he's sovereign, that he's ruler, that he's powerful, that he's in control. But we don't want just a king that's off there just ruling us at a distance. We want a king that we can come to. We want a king that is interceding for us. The job of a priest was to take the people and connect them with God, right? The priests were the intermediaries between the people and God. In the Old Testament, that's their role, was they had to go to the priest to get the sacrifice. They had to go to the temple where the priests were to connect with a holy God. Well, Jesus is the high priest now. And he has that role that we come to Jesus so that we can connect with the Trinity, with God the Father and with the Holy Spirit. And so that's why it's important that Jesus is both priest and king in our lives. So as we move on here to the next portion, chapters 7, 8, our conclusion to these visions. And again, it's a continued challenge from Zechariah. So there's a group of Jews in this next portion who are grieving over their previous sin and the destruction of the temple, and they're grieving inside, how long? Right? How long until you're going to establish your kingdom? Well, Zechariah reminds them of their ancestors and the rejection, and the prophets, how they called them to repent and sent them into exile. But their generation would only see the Messianic kingdom if they were faithful to the covenants. And this is what Zechariah says about what they could expect as far as the redeemed Jerusalem. Chapter 8, verses 14 through 17. This is what the Lord Almighty says: just as I had determined to bring disaster on you and showed no pity when your ancestors angered me, says the Lord Almighty, so now I have determined to do good again to Jerusalem and Judah. Do not be afraid. These are the things you are to do. Speak the truth to each other and render true and sound judgment in your courts. Do not plot evil against each other, and do not love to swear falsely. I hate all this, declares the Lord. You know, if we're kingdom people, if we're people of King Jesus, these are the things that should be true of us. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he's just talking about his struggle of being a Christian in a worldly kind of environment. In his workplace, he's surrounded by mostly non-Christians, and he feels like often he's painted with that brush of the Christian that none of us want to be painted with, you know, and the one that maybe the news puts out there, the media puts out there. And he says, well, how do I change that? Or how do we change that as a church? And I said, I don't think we can change that image that is portrayed as Christians. I said, the best thing we do is, in our own lives, portray the best image of Christ. I can't change what other Christians do. I can't change what the church at large does to portray a certain image of what a Christian is. All I can do is, I'm only has control of my life to some degree. And all I can do is portray the best image of God's kingdom to the people around me. And that's just what I encouraged him with, and I encourage you through Zechariah, the same thing. The end of the book gets really more into detail of what this Messianic kingdom is like, and it divides it up into basically two ways. talks about the first coming of Christ, and then it talks about a future kingdom of Christ. Just awesome, specific prophecy that we see here in Zechariah, and then we see this prophecy fulfilled so specifically in Jesus. In chapters 9:11, specifically 9:9, it talks about Jesus coming humbly on a donkey. It says, "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." Well, in Matthew 21, he talks about, he says this event, when Jesus does come into Jerusalem, he says specifically, this is the fulfillment of that prophecy from Zechariah. I mean, if you live in that time and you had this person walking through on a donkey, you'd be like, oh man, how great is that guy? What kind of king is he? He's riding on a donkey, not a horse. But it was all meant to be, right? He was going to fulfill this prophecy perfectly. And yes, it spoke to his kingship, but also talked about his humility and his way of coming in as a humble king and savior. Then next what we see is the king is symbolized as a shepherd caring for a flock. But this king is rejected by his people. He's rejected by his sheep. And it also talks about these other shepherds who rejected the main shepherd, and that was probably the Pharisees and the leaders at the time who rejected Jesus as well. So the king hands the people over to the corrupt shepherds. So the question remains, will the rejection of the Messiah last forever? I mean, the whole Old Testament is just continued rejection, continued sin, continued disobedience. Again, we still see that in the nation of Israel. We still see that worldwide. Is this going to continue forever? Well, chapters 12 through 14 is the answer, and it really says no, it won't happen forever. It depicts this new Jerusalem where God will rule with justice and will confront evil finally. God will pour out his Spirit on his people. They will grieve and they will repent over the rejection of the Messiah. And this is what it says in chapter 12:10. "I will pour out on the house of David and its inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for a firstborn son." Ultimately, I believe the Jews will realize what they have done, and they will grieve over that, and will turn in repentance to God. So in chapter 14, we see this new Jerusalem, which is final gathering place for all the nations. A city becomes the Garden of Eden, right? So if you see the details there of what happens, and it brings healing to all of God's creation. We can all struggle with discouragement, I believe. While Zechariah contains judgment on Judah for sure, like most of the prophets, it also brings hope. It also brings hope that the reign of the Lord will come over his people. You know, we can get discouraged in our day-to-day life. I probably have not seen or heard as much discouragement as I have in this year. I know so many people were just like, can we just move on to 2021, just forget the whole year, and hopefully it'll get better. I remember it was like around New Year's this last year coming into 2020, and I said, you know what, your last year might have been bad, but let's just pray that this year will be better. And God answers prayers differently than we hope sometimes, doesn't he? You know, obviously we have the pandemic, we have the riots and the protesting. We have just a crazy political kind of environment right now leading into the election. I know that has a lot of people worried and scared and all that stuff. And I'll be honestly, as a pastor, I've been discouraged at times this year. You know, when the pandemic hit and they said, okay, you can't have church on Sunday morning, that's devastating for a pastor. You know, we live to meet with our church. We live to preach. We live to be with people. And when they say you can't gather on Sunday morning, you can't basically, you know, preach in that way, you can't really, in essence, really meet with people at all, you know, for about a month and a half, I really felt like I couldn't even meet with you guys one-on-one or in a group. And that became very discouraging. And then on top of that, we just had so many delays with the building. We really thought we were going to be in by May or June, and that got prolonged and prolonged. And I just felt like in a lot of ways, personally, I was getting discouraged just as a pastor, as an individual, as a Christian. And when I was studying this book of Zechariah this week, God just reminded me, he's like, your memory is so short. Speaking to myself, he said, your memory of my faithfulness is so short. Your memory of my goodness is so short. And he just reminded me, too, that he's got a purpose in everything. I mean, God's not just sitting on the sidelines going, you know what, whatever happens, happens, and, maybe I'll clean up the mess when it's over. He allows and makes things happen with a very distinct purpose in everything. And so for me to be discouraged about this year, or me to go, God, what are you doing, is kind of a useless thing to even bother myself with. Because he's doing something. I might not know what it is. He might not ever inform me. I might not be on the high enough pay grade for him to care if I know or not, or you either. But he's doing something. I've been talking to some of you, maybe something what he's doing, maybe he's kind of weeding out the church a little bit. Maybe he's strengthening the true believers, and he's showing that there's some that are not true believers and they thought they were. That might be part of what he's doing. I don't know. But regardless, just like the people in Zechariah's time, I can trust him. Pandemics should not shake our faith. Riots should not shake our faith. Political environments should not shake our faith. Even the trials that we face in our own lives, whether it's medical, whether it's relational, financial, should not shake our faith. Trials are meant there to strengthen our faith, aren't they? Right? We know that from James. So I want you to be encouraged today. I know some of you have read the book of Zechariah. I know some of you have read the book of Haggai recently. And I pray that the same effect happened to you that it happened to me this week when I was writing Zechariah. God just woke me up and says, just stop. Stop being discouraged. Just stop losing faith in me. It's hard for me to not see some of the same faces that I've seen for the last several years on Sunday mornings, people who have not come back since the church closed, knowing that many of those people aren't going to come back, whether they're afraid of the virus, or whether they just got comfortable being at home, where they found another church. And even that, God says, stop being discouraged. He goes, I've got a plan for this church. Things like this should not shake our faith with our own lives, with our families, with his church, right? It's his church, and he's got a plan for it, whether it's Christ Community or the church at large. And I love the way that this book ends. It puts our attention on this new Jerusalem, this new heaven, this new earth that God's going to create. He's moving everything in that direction. That's his end goal. And so I just pray that we can live with that mindset. That we can just live with this mindset that we're his children, we're his heirs. That my hope isn't based on my circumstances or the circumstances of the world. My hope is based on my identity in Christ. And that identity will never change. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, he has adopted you into his family. And I've talked about this before. That adoption is different than adopting a child into family. In that time, it was a rich person who didn't have a son to hand his inheritance over to. He didn't have somebody to pass on his estate to. And so what they would do is they would adopt a slave. They would adopt a servant and bring them in as their firstborn son. You get that picture in your head, that's us. We were slaves of sin, deserving of nothing. God adopts us into his family and gives us everything. There's nothing better than that. To be an heir of Christ means that everything that belongs to God belongs to us. It doesn't mean like it's a selfish thing, like, oh great, I get all this health and wealth, but it just means that God loves us that much and he wants us to enjoy that much of his riches. And we get to enjoy a lot of that now in this life, but in the next life, it'll be more than we can imagine. But I also can't help but to ask the question is, are you in that kingdom? Are you in the kingdom of Christ? Because the Bible is also clear that not everybody will be in that kingdom. Not everybody will be inside the walls of the New Jerusalem. And again, read Zechariah, and it greatly contrasts the difference between those outside the walls and those inside the walls of New Jerusalem. We know from Matthew, right? Matthew 7:13 through 14 says, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. You're not just going to stumble across that road. It's just not going to happen by chance. The Holy Spirit of God has got to open your eyes to that gate, to that narrow road. And he's the one who has to do the miracle for you to find it. And if you're here this morning going, I don't know. I don't know if I'm in the kingdom. I don't know if I'm saved, if I have salvation. I believe it's God's ordained purpose that you're here this morning and listening to this message. That today might be the day that you enter through those narrow gates, that you become part of his kingdom, and you can enjoy all that he has for you. Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe with your heart that he was raised, you will be saved. That's how you come into the kingdom, as you confess Jesus as Lord, as King, as Messiah. You believe that his death and resurrection had all the power, was completely sufficient enough to save you, that you didn't have to earn it, you didn't have to jump through hoops, you just have to trust in what he did for you and give your life, your will of your life to follow Jesus as Savior. So I just pray that we would live like people who belong to this kingdom. Do we live like people who belong to this amazing kingdom, or do we just live like people who are citizens of this world? There should be a huge difference. And I pray that we would live like people who believe that God will bring a new heaven and new earth, and that we have the hope and confidence because of the death and resurrection of Jesus that we are saved and have eternal life. Let's take a moment here to pray and ask for that kind of confidence, ask for that kind of grace. Father, thank you that when you save us, you don't leave us without grace, God, that you don't leave us without power, God. You say that you will be with us to the end of the age. That's your promise to us. And that's your promise to us, but at the same time, we have to walk in that faith. We have to walk in that grace. Depend on that grace and your Holy Spirit to live a supernatural life where your kingdom will be done on earth and in our life as it is in heaven. That's our desire, God. Make it true. In Christ's name, amen.
Please stand. How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that he should give his only Son to make a wretched treasure. How great the pain of seeing loss, the Father turns his face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon a cross, my sin upon his shoulders. His wounds have been my ransom.
Thank you, ladies, for leading us this morning. And may God give us His grace to live as we are in His kingdom now, and not that we're not just waiting for a kingdom later. And He'll give us His grace to do that. So God bless you. Thank you for being here to worship the Lord together. And God willing, we'll see you either this week sometime or next Sunday. Have a great day.